So this is honestly just the most incredible game by 16-year-old Gukesh, and I'm not aware of anyone that's yet covered this amazing game on YouTube. Now this was played in the Menorca Open. I was looking for Gukesh's games because he won the Open after 10 players finished tied first. I mean, it was an incredible tie. So many people, one of them also Hans Niemann, another super GM, and then Gukesh, he went to tie breaks and won on tie breaks. So I dug through his games, found this one as a nice win from the tournament to bring you tonight, and then just uncovered this insane game, an opening novelty the likes of which has never been seen, followed by insane middle game tactics, and then a finish with a queen sack that just is the icing on the cake, right? So let's see what happened here. He was playing against a fellow Indian, by the way, Aryan Chopra, 2600 plus GM, strong player. Now we had d5, c4, c6, the Slav defense. These knights develop, we see knight c3, and e6 now sets up the semi-Slav formation, so no bishop outside the pawn chain. This is a rock solid, different way to play. And now here Gukesh, he goes for pawn g3. More common there is bishop g5. It can get very, very sharp. We also see e3 as a common move. But okay, this is more of a Catalan structure, and black now takes on c4. Common idea. I mean, white is giving that pawn plus developing the bishop away from this diagonal to capture it, and black can now go b5 to support the pawn. But of course, when you do so, you weaken this diagonal, and knight e5 immediately plays against that and targets this pawn. Now you can defend with queen to b6, but white gets long-term pressure. This is a sample line after this key b3 move, because although this pawn takes and you recapture, black's still firmly a pawn ahead. The long-term idea is to bring a rook to the c-file, sometimes the queen too, and in combination with knight and bishop, you get tons of pressure against this backwards pawn. This is a dead piece, and sometimes you even just sit a knight on the dark square, just dominate the black position. So these are the long-term ideas if you try and hold on to the pawn too dearly. So instead, a6 was played, saying to Gukesh, you can capture the pawn if you want, but then this is a sample line. Queen b6, and if captures on b8, well, the rook can simply take back. Material's level, but black's got no development issues here. These bishops are going to stream out, the king can get castled. So instead, we see castles played. Now bishop b7, and this is where Gukesh reveals this insane opening novelty. The main move here, there's been a ton of Super GM games, right, is pawn b3, and pawn a4 is also common. Some kind of move to play against this pawn mass on the queen side. But what does Gukesh do? Queen c2. This is some seriously deep prep, right? Because if Chopra was playing against a weaker player, then I've no doubt he would probably just snap off this pawn and say, okay, show me what you got. And if he does do that, by the way, which he didn't do, like, it's not clear the follow-up for white here. Bishop f4 is the best move to cover this knight, but you're a firm 2 pawns down here. I mean, the computer says bishop e7, and then it's suggesting, knight e4. There's b3 ideas, rook a to d1, bringing a rook to the d file. Different ideas, but still, you're 2 pawns down. There's a lot to prove here. So, okay, who knows what Gukesh had planned, right? I'm sure this will be studied by the top guys after this game. But what we see in the game is knight b to d7. So Chopra backs down from the opening prep. Gukesh probably working with his engine. Doesn't want any part of it. Now the rook comes to the d file, saying if you capture, my pawn will take back, I'll kick your knight away, and then I get knight e4, looking at these dark squares once again. Such a theme of the game. So knight d5 was played instead. Common idea, and if you try e4, this is not a good move, because after captures, you've actually killed your own bishop, plus black can change this pawn structure in a very favourable manner. So, no e4 played. We see the knight jump to e4 instead, looking at these dark squares as mentioned, and here black decides it's time to chop that one off. The pawn recaptures, and then go queen b8. So although you've given white that great pawn supporting d6, this is black's idea to attack it, but it wasn't best, by the way. The computer preferred just bishop e7, looking to castle the king, and that comes back to bite Chopra, because now we see pawn b3, an excellent move, leaving this pawn, which is now captured after takes here, takes, the queen chopped on e5. I mean, how many of us would have defended that pawn with f4 or bishop f4 or something? Not Gukesh. And now what would you play here? Your rook is attacked in the corner. How many of us are going bishop b2 to defend like that? But it's not best, because the queen can then drop to c7, and okay, there is pressure here, but black can slowly unravel, and they do have this big presence in the center, c5 and e5 on the cards at the right moment. So what did Gukesh do? He went bishop to f4. Just an absolutely stunning move, as we're going to see. The tactics are just crazy. Now, the knight should capture, right? That's actually the top engine line. Plus, just humanly, it looks completely normal to chop off that bishop. But here is the amazing follow-up, and do feel free to pause if you want to look for it. Because the move to play is not pawn recaptures. It's this stunning idea of knight f6 check. How many of us are seeing that? Now, the point is, if the queen captures or the pawn, either one, it doesn't matter, you run into this same mating net with bishop takes on c6 check, this one recapturing, queen takes check, and then after the king nudges up, this is checkmate. And if instead of recapturing that bishop here, you go king e7 immediately, well then queen c5 delivers a different kind of checkmate. Just incredible. This covers the square for the king to escape from. And coming back here, after knight f6 check, if you don't capture that one with queen or pawn, this is the top engine line. If instead you go king e7, well, now white plays this follow-up move of taking the knight at this point. Still the queen can't take, it's immune. This time, by the way, you start with queen c5 check, then we get the same mate which we just saw before, etc, etc, etc. This is mate. So coming back here, that's why you can't actually take this one with the queen. If the queen captures the pawn, best move, well then there's different good moves for white. One of them is e3, very sadistic. You still can't take the knight. And after the queen goes, whoops, let's say to e5, top move, well then there's knight d7, hits the queen, and all sorts of good follow-up moves here. There's queen c5 check, there's knight c5. I mean, just the most amazing tactics. So after bishop f4, this one was not captured. Chopra left it alone and went queen to h5. And this allows Gukesh to really turn the screw on the dark squares. So he goes bishop d6. Very simple idea. If you capture, I'm going to take back with check, pick up your bishop. So instead, we see the rook coming to d8, attacking that piece. But best was actually castle's queenside, because you bring the rook, let me show that actually. You bring the rook, but also cover the bishop. But, okay, it's very scary to put your king in front of the queen. There's open lines here. Now, the bishop could be firing at you, so I can definitely understand why black didn't do this. Instead, rook d8 played, but now queen c5. Now, the computer calls this a miss, but it's a great move. Basically because they preferred knight c5, or takes first, sorry, then knight c5. But this is still a great idea, because how do you stop the threat of takes and knight d6 check? And you basically don't. f6 is the best move, which Chopra finds, but then we have captures, the rook takes back, and check literally just picks up an exchange. Because if you come here, well now we win a piece for free, and it's check, and your rook is dropping, absolutely horrendous. So the rook takes, the queen takes back, and now we see the point of the pawn to f6. This queen is supported to come to e5. But Gukesh, he keeps the queens on the board. Correct decision. Nudges back to c5. Black doesn't now take this pawn. It's just way too dangerous to open that file against your exposed king. So instead, rook f7 lifts into the game, coming over to the d file. Rook d4, rook d7, pawn e3, just more pieces on dark squares, so beautiful. And now after pawn to f5, here Gukesh, he knows when to switch plans. Even though he just played pawn e3, he now sees that e4 is a good move. I mean, maybe black's looking to nudge back the queen here with this f5 move, not entirely clear, but e4 is just very strong. Now the knight can't actually move, you know, if it tries to hop back, you lose your queen, there's a pin there. So you have to take this pawn, and now the second rook joins the party, preparing to pick up this pawn. So queen d6 offers another exchange of queens, comes off the e-file. Gukesh again, he drops back, this time to c1. More dark square domination, I just absolutely love it. And by contrast, look at this bishop on b7. The light squares are awful for black, you know, that piece is entombed. I love these structures with the open C and A lines where you've gambited a pawn. And I was literally looking at this exact structure earlier on AIMCHESS because I've been using that to practice. It pulls in your own game data from Lichess and chess.com, and that's what's so awesome about it, is you're training in positions you play a lot in your own games. Now they are sponsoring this video, but I stand by everything I've said, right? So check out the link in the description below if that is of interest, and you can sign up absolutely free, give it a whirl, see if you like it. Plus, if you do want to go premium, get all the bells and whistles, then you can use code EPIC at checkout to get a great discount when you first sign up. But back to this game here. So after this move of queen c1, we see e3 played. Now black chucks the pawn, yes, but after rook recaptures, well, we see the point c5, trying to liberate that piece I just mentioned as a terrible one. By the way, the knight can't take the rook, it's pinned to the queen. And now here Gukesh, he just puts the icing on the cake. So you can go rook d2, rook d1, something like that. But he finds this awesome combination of rook takes on e6 with check. Queen recaptures, and now this is the point. You win back the queen by force. Now queen takes rook was played, but it wasn't best. Better was knight c7 because you force white to take, and then you establish this beautiful defensive octopus, holds this pawn and this one, and does a good job of defending the king. But what we see in the game was queen captures, the bishop takes back, and now there's a lot of pressure already. For example, this pawn is attacked, and if you go rook c7 to defend it, then queen g5 is strong. You're attacking this knight. If it drops back here, well, then we can check, and the king actually has to come here. You know, there are also threats to check down here, all sorts of things going on, and then you can take, rook recaptures, the pawn drops anyway. Whoops, not there. The pawn drops anyway, and white's in the driving seat. So you can't really defend this pawn. So instead, knight c3 played. White can win that knight, but black can then take here. We see check, the rook blocks, and now this pawn drops. That one was unavoidable. g6 now played, and f4 from Gukesh, and it's a great policy now that we'll see. After king f7, g4, classic idea to start storming with the pawns, using them as an attacking force against the king. That's why the queen is so powerful here against these two minor pieces, well, a minor and a rook, is that the king is exposed. So we see bishop b7, now king f2, rook d7, possibly looking to invade, but after queen b6, that rook is going nowhere. It's glued to the defense of this bishop. So rook e7 played, stops the king from marching over the board, so it comes to g3. We see bishop d5 targeting the b pawn, it nudges up to b4, and now bishop c4, abandons the a pawn but goes active. And Gukesh, he's not too quick to run after the material. Instead, he pushes f5, looking to rip open that king. We see captures, pawn takes back, the king nudges back to e8, and now king f4 starts this beautiful king march, king d7, and now this pawn is picked up. We see rook f7, king e5, check, king d4, the rook comes after the pawn once again, it nudges up to f6, king d8, and now king c5. Where on earth is this king headed? Well, we're about to see, because after rook d7, king c6, check, king b6, well, now after bishop d5, we see this beautiful nudgy move of queen to a5. And now if you check the king, well, you can step back with a counter check, and therefore you're winning this bishop. And if you block like this, well, you can win even more by king d6. Now you're threatening to take the rook, which is pinned. You're about to checkmate. So we didn't see the rook checking from this square. Instead, king d7 breaks this x-ray pin, and now queen takes on b5, check. Low on time, black can't find any defense, not that there is any. If you go king d6, well then this is a really nice finish. Then you pick up the rook, and one of these two pawns is going through. As we see in the game, the rook blocks the check with a counter check, but bang! This is the nice shot to finish the game, giving the queen. Here we see resignation, because if the black bishop recaptures like this, well then the pawn is running through, the king has to come to stop it, and now you take this one, and this pawn runs through, wins the day. What an incredible game from 16-year-old Gukesh, and congrats on winning the tournament. To see another phenomenal game, check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching, and see you soon.